Welcome to the Build Right podcast. We build knowledge, insight, and connections in the world of construction. Whether you're a seasoned contractor, builder, or just curious about the industry, we break down the latest trends, tips, and technologies shaping the future. Join us each week as we chat with experts, share stories from the field, and explore the challenges and triumphs that come with bringing our visions to life. Welcome, everybody. Today I have with me Anthony Guidarelli. Say hi, Ant.
Hi, everyone.
So, you're talking to the mic. That's fine. You're doing it.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
All right. So, Anthony is a award-winning builder, remodeler.
No
awards.
I won an award once for best website design. That's about it.
That's an award. That counts.
I guess so. Okay.
But you've been in the industry for how many years now?
This is probably since 1989 is when I built my first home. Got out of the industry for a couple of years and got back into it in 91.
Okay. All right. So tell us about your history a little bit. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get into construction?
Okay. It's from Rotterdam, New York, as a lot of builders in the capital region are from, in and around the Bellevue Builders neighborhood, that part of Rotterdam, which I witnessed a lot of builders and remodelers evolving due to the fact that Bellevue Builders had such a strong presence in the industry. And as I had said to you in the past, Bellevue Builders was great at evolving and mentoring people into the industry and creating builders and remodelers. So I watched a lot of people in my neighborhood basically become builders. And there was one builder in particular that I had watched growing up as a kid go from a builder, a remodeler, to a builder, to a developer. And I said, early on in life, I kind of always wanted to emulate what he did and wanted to be like him.
So your first generation, no family members were involved in it?
Correct. First generation. I was born and raised in independent family businesses. My dad had a retail awards business. My brother had a restaurant. And my other brother had a softball field that I grew up working in from the age of 13.
Nice.
So had a responsibility from the age of 13 from a work perspective.
What did you get into first? Did you jump right into home building, or?
No, I started. I'll say back. I'll start with the beginning. I guess started in the restaurant business with my brother when I was 13. Worked all throughout high school. Evolved from dishwasher to pizza maker to cook, bartender. Helped manage the
pizza maker.
Do you
still got it?
We still make homemade pizzas.
Nice.
And my wife want to stretch the dough, and I'll say, no, you stretch it this way, not that way. But she's usually right because her pizza comes out better than mine. So always in and around independent family businesses, and you basically had to work to survive, and you had to keep the doors open, and you had a responsibility. And I think that gave me a good fundamental work ethic for the construction business and the construction industry.
So what was your first job? Do you remember?
I worked in the construction world. My first job was for a home builder, remodeler as a laborer. I wanted to get into it. So when I was 19, he was a customer at my brother's restaurant, and he was a contractor. And I said, I want to get into this. I always wanted to be a carpenter. And he was actually a master carpenter, builder as well. But by trade, he was a master carpenter. So started working with him one summer as a laborer. Mm-hmm. And he was that contractor that said, be there at 7 and he'd show up at 10.
So one summer into it,
yeah.
And then you said, I'm doing this on my own? Is that the...
No. I worked with him for a summer. And then after that, I said, I need to, I had basically graduated high school at that point. I went to college for one semester to business school, and I was not a student. So after one semester, I decided I wanted to get out and figure out what to do. And that's when I got into the construction world and asked him for a job as a laborer to see how I would fit in with it. Mm-hmm. So worked with him for one summer. Then I realized I needed some more schooling. So back then, this is probably 84, 85, the computer era was just kicking off, and had a customer at my brother's restaurant where I was still bartending that went to school for computer technology, electronics. He was an electronic technician in the new world of computer repair. So he talked me into going and getting a certification to do computer repair work. So I went and took a crash course, 1-year program of electronics to be an electronic technician. by the time we finished the course, the computer market was changing so fast that everything we had learned in that class was pretty much useless.
Really?
Yeah. So they taught us how to fix circuit boards, replace the resistors and the little LED devices that were on circuit boards. So we were learning how to fix circuit boards in that class. By the time we finished it, they were just taking the circuit boards out and throwing them out and just putting new circuit boards in. And they weren't paying technicians to repair the components on it.
Okay.
So now I'm basically, I have this electricity certification, whatever it was. Worked in the electrical field a little bit with my brother-in-law who had an instrumentation company, industrial electrical work. Dad wants to retire from the family business. And my brothers and I got together and they said, come on in the business with us. We'll retire Dad. And did that for 2 years. We rebuilt the business to some degree, built a new shop. And I was the guy that went in there and ripped everything apart and said, let's build new gondolas over here. Let's build a workshop in the one side of the building that we never had. And basically, by the time I was done with that, I'm sitting in that business saying to myself, I got to get in the construction business. I was looking out the window one day and I saw that guy I worked for come down the hill in his truck. And I'm like, I want to be doing that. And from that point forward, I just kind of said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I've got to do it now. Got one child, another child on the way. I said, if I don't do this now, I'll never be able to do it. So I said to my brothers, I need $500. Got to buy some tools. That was it.
No kidding.
Bought $500 worth of tools, pickup truck, and just started putting advertisements out there for handyman and repair work.
So you started in the handyman
I
space.
started in the Dial Directly in the Daily Gazette. I ran an ad in there, telephone jacks, electrical outlets, handyman work, repair work, and I would get calls, and I would just go and do the services. From, like I said, install phone jacks and outlets, light fixtures, to repairing gutters, to fixing doorknobs and repairing doors, and you name it, I did it. Because I had to perform, because I had a wife and, I had responsibility at home, and my wife was a stay-at-home mom.
So that naturally blossomed into doing renovations?
Yeah, so from the repair work, when I said I'm going to leave my brothers in the business and leave the business, the insurance man that we had at the time said, you're going into the home improvement world or remodeling world? He said, I'll give you a job. And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, I need my offices remodeled. And I'm like, I can't do that. I got to figure out how to do this. So I was able to find my wife's cousin who was a remodeler. And I said, hey, I've got this project. You think you can do this with me? Because I don't know how to do it. And I'm going to need you. So
do you remember what year that was?
That was probably 1990. It was 91.
What was the climate like in the industry at that time?
So I probably wasn't savvy enough to understand what was really going on in the world, because in the business. So I'll think back to what the building was strong, but I think the economy was weak back in the early 90s, because we had just come off the housing boom of the 80s and the economic things that were going on in the 80s in the housing world. I know there was a boom in the mid 80s, flattened out in the late 80s and early 90s. So I guess that climate that I was in at that time was probably not strong, but just kind of, you had to grind it out in the construction world for sure.
Okay. How long did you do the renovations before you got into your first build?
Probably, I think 3.5 years.
Was it for a customer? Or
it was for
it
a customer. It was for a customer that owned a business. And that same insurance person that I was doing the office renovation for, he would refer me a lot. And he'd always say to me, if you're going to stay busy in this business, you have to learn how to do everything. And you'll always be busy, because he had some contractors that had worked for him for years that retired, but they did everything. They would do painting, masonry, electrical, roofing. They would do it all. And they always had work. So I always had that in my brain that okay, if I want to stay busy, which I need to because I have to support my family, I have to be busy all the time. And the only way to stay busy all the time was, if I do everything, I'm offering so many services that there's always somebody that needs something. Mm-hmm. So that's how I kept busy. So back to your question as to when my first build after 91 was, I think, 94. And I built a custom house for somebody, that prominent business owner in Rotterdam at the time, that everybody said to me, don't you dare build for that guy. He's going to be really, really tough. And I'm like, no, he's a nice guy. And the guy was great the whole time. And I was cutting my teeth still on building. And I actually learned that I had to subcontract things out on that house. I tried doing a lot of the tasks with my guy. I always had one or two guys. But eventually I realized, okay, I've got to bring in a mason to do the masonry work, do the cultured stone work. Brought in a framer, I brought in a roofer, brought in a trimmer, I brought in mostly everybody. And I realized that, okay, I'll just keep the job moving. And, you have to bring the right people in. And I had people in my circle that I knew I could trust. So I was able to bring people in and execute things the right way. And I was relying on their expertise because I didn't have as much expertise as they did. So I'd always have people around me that had stronger expertise in the trade or the field or whatever I was doing.
At what point did you start land acquisition?
That was probably 5 or 6 years after that. I'll take that back. It was only a couple of years after that. So after that piece of property came up for sale, maybe 2 years after that, because now, okay, I finally built my first house. And that's what I always wanted to do, was build. I found a piece of property that came up for sale in the city of Schenectady. And this is...
See, this is easy. That was my next question. You already knew it was coming.
So I found a piece of property that came up for sale in the city of Schenectady. So like, okay, that's a risky market to build a house on. So we were going to build a spec house. I was going to build a spec house. And I had somebody that wanted to do it with me, financial partner that was going to put up the money. And I'm like, I have this piece of land. We can build this house on it. And we built this spec house on it. And that house, I did everything with my guy. We framed it, we roofed it, we sided it, we did everything. And then
did you purchase the land?
We did. We purchased the land. It was a $17,000 building lot at the time, which was a lot of money for a building lot because this is mid-90s. Not a lot of money, but it was, probably like a $75,000 or $80,000 lot today. So I said, we need to build a spec house. Let's build it on speculation and we'll get a buyer. Well, as soon as we started framing it, the GE announced a bunch of layoffs in the city of Schenectady. I think St. Clair's Hospital or Ellis Hospital, one of the hospitals, had announced a whole lot of layoffs. Now we're building a spec house in that city, and we couldn't get it sold. It took about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years to get it sold. And I learned a lot. I learned about, just speculating on building. I learned that you can't trust the market. You've got to be ready for a downturn. You have to have a plan B, when you're doing these things. And I did have a plan B in place to some degree because I had a partner that was the financial strength. And I was the grunt in the back that was getting it built. So I spent a lot of time learning about the business itself just with that one spec house. Not the technical aspect of it, but the business side of it and the risk of building on speculation.
That can be worse sometimes than you putting up the money on your own, right? Because now you've got somebody that you got to answer to.
I'm accountable. Yeah,
absolutely. So that's a lot of pressure.
But I always, and I've had different situations like that over the years, but the primary goal is to make your partner money first before I made money. And I think on that deal in particular, he made more money than me because I talked him into it. He took the risk, but I talked him into it. So I was structuring the whole process. So I felt responsible for the end result. So I had to make sure my investor made money. He made money in the end. I made a little, I basically made a wage for some of the services, not all of them.
You got paid to go to school.
I got paid to go to school. And at the same time, I'm doing remodels and doing other ththings to make cash flow. So it was just, it was a whirlwind. I was young and strong, and there's just like full speed ahead, You're going to succeed. You just have to, sometimes you fall down, you got to get back up, and you have to keep going after it.
A lot of times when you and I talk about cash flow and how important it is and the differences in the remodeling and the new construction industry, where one supports the other, right? Because in new building, it's so tough to get that consistent cash flow because the projects are stretched out over such a long period of time that you have to keep remodels going. If you're smaller, company like I am or like you were, to keep that revenue coming in and paying for your debt services or even the project.
You're keeping cash flowing. Yeah. Positive cash flowing, hopefully.
So you continue doing spec houses pretty much every year for the rest of your career, correct?
Yeah. From that point on, it was, okay, I learned on this one. Let's find another one. Well, how did I find lots? Knocked on doors. knocked on doors. I'd drive by a piece of property in and around my house where I lived at the time. I scoured that whole neighborhood. I lived off of Upper Albany Street in the town, just into the town of Colony. But there were a lot of vacant lots around my house. And I would just, if there was a vacant lot, I would just go knock on their door. Or back then, this is before the computer era, I'd go over to the town hall, find the 311, look in the tax rolls, find the 311s, which is vacant land. That's the tax code classification. Go to the phone book, find out who owned it, and then either call them or send them a letter or try to buy the lot. And
You can still do that today.
I just did it a year and a half ago. There was a lot, and I think I had mentioned this to you, by my house that I had sent them a letter probably 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. And I'm on my bike a year and a half ago, and I'm like, that lot's still vacant. I drove home on my bike, put an email together real quick, email letter together real quick, put it in the mail on a Saturday. And I got a call, I think it was either Monday or the following Tuesday. And he said, hey, you sent me a letter on that lot. I'll sell it to you. And I said, I'll be right over. And I bought the lot. Yeah. That happened like within 3 or 4 days.
So over time, how has the approval process changed for towns versus from when you first started versus now?
So I first started developing properties in the town of Colony. So the town of Colony was notorious for having one of the toughest processes to get through the approval, to get through the building or land approval process to build houses on. You had to go through all these different divisions of the municipality to get to the point where you can get a building permit.
Do you think they are today?
So they're definitely
still?
I don't know. I haven't done anything in Colony in probably 3 or 4, probably about 6 or 7 years now. It's just like the town of Colony was so big that I basically had to understand how the town had functioned in all the individual departments: water, sewer, planning, stormwater, and building. So I had to understand in that particular town how to navigate around all those departments to get answers for all those departments, because the departments didn't talk to each other.
Okay.
So I had to figure out, okay, if I need a sewer permit, I've got to go to planning first to make sure it'll work with planning. And then I've got to go back over to sewer, which is called Pure Waters, get an approval from them. And then I'll go back to building to see what they say. And they say, they'll say, oh, that's great, but now go over to Latham Water. That was their water district. And get an approval from them, and maybe we'll give you the permit. Then, by the way, go hit the highway department and make sure you can get an approval out of them as well. And then let's go research the catch basins, and let's see how they're flowing. Let's see if you need to increase the size of the stormwater pond that's behind that catch basin. I just want a building permit for one lot. I don't want to rebuild your infrastructure. But that's how
that sounds worse than today.
Well, that is today, though. It still works that way today.
Yeah.
So, and I always said this too, and then I realized that, oh boy, every time a builder walks in here for an application or wants an approval, it's an opportunity for the municipality to improve their infrastructure. That's small scale or big scale. It happens all the time, and I get it. That's how it works. We're taxing their infrastructure by adding more usage. You're going to have to pay for it. You're going to have to help improve it, because especially in today's world, because the tax dollars are, just so out of whack.
It seems that today builders get fought a lot on development. Wouldn't that be something that's advantageous for towns to bring housing in for the tax revenue, or to bring other development?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how the math works. They always said that, from a builder's and developer's perspective, you always thought, look, you're bringing tax revenue to the town by improving a piece of property, building a house on it, creating tax revenue, property tax revenue. But there was always the reaction that it didn't offset the expense of infrastructure. And I don't know how those statistics balance out today. And, again, backing up to the town of Columbia, they were a great town to work with, because they were actually easy to work with. If you went through the process once, you knew what you were up against the second time. And it was always black and white. So that's a very easy process to work with if it's black and white. And as a developer, what you have to do ahead of time. So when you're acquiring a piece of land, your cost you have an idea as to where your cost projections will be for infrastructure, or the development cost for that lot or piece of property. Mm-hmm. Most towns these days are very accommodating. It's just knowing and understand how to work through their process and treating them with the respect that you want and they want. And it's about relationships at the end of the day.
That is true.
And I can work I've never had a town that I couldn't work in, and it was just about the approach of going into a town and saying, look, hi, I'm Anthony, and I want to build a house on this piece of property. What do I have to do? Could you step me through the process? When you go in with that approach, 9 out of 10 times, you'll come out, with a positive result.
If you had a piece of advice for somebody today starting, trying to get into building homes, buying spot lots, what would you tell them?
Just, for starters, have plan A, then plan B. Plan A is best case scenario. This is how I want it to work. Plan B is if it doesn't work that way, how are you going to survive it financially? Because it's an expensive business, and it takes a lot of cash lay out front to get things in motion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of, just plan properly and do your homework and your research and have your comfort level so that if something goes right, that's great. But if something doesn't go right, you're still going to be okay. Mm-hmm. So that's, however you want to structure that plan B is up to you. But just, with me, with those situations, I always had to have that plan B because I had no financial safety net. It was either sink or swim, and couldn't sink, just keep swimming,
Can you remember any hiccups that stand out to you? Any of the biggest issues that you had dealing with throughout your career with municipalities or projects going sideways? Something that happened that was
not.
You still lose sleep over.
Yeah, it was always like your cash outlay, whether you have banks involved or partners involved. You always want it to go according to plan because of the cash outlay, and you're gambling to some degree. You're laying cash on the table to do things in a certain way, and you have to speculate and anticipate that things are going to go that way. So again, if they go differently, how do you recover from that? So your question was a specific event, or it depends on where I was at in my career at the time.
You got to have some juicy ones in there. Something.
Well, I had one. I think I had mentioned to you. I had built these 2 custom homes up in Clifton Park, and just finished them. They were back in the late 90s, like maybe 97, 98, 99, somewhere in there. No, it wasn't. It was actually early 2000s. They were $450,000 houses. So those were big dollar houses back then. And I had just finished the one, and I'm finishing the other one for a customer that was brutal, right? And I was just green, and I needed to sell that lot because I put my tail on the line to buy that lot, and I had to build a house on it to sell it. This guy probably could sense that in me, and he was just brutal. The whole building process was brutal with him. And I finally get the house done.
I'm not asking you his name, but do you remember his name?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember his name. I remember his face. Matter of fact, I thought I saw him once out west when I was doing something. I'm like, that's it. No. So anyways, you never forget those situations. So we finished the house, and we finished I think that night, we finished the house. We put sod in. We put the driveways in, landscaping in, and behind the house was a hill. And it was pretty quick the way it went up the grade. And I was on the softball field in Colony coaching my daughter, and it's late, and I'm seeing thunderstorms in the North Country. I could see the skies dark, and the lightning and thunder going on. I'm like, there's something going on up there. I know they're getting a storm, and we had just planted everything, and it's on a hill, and it's Clifton Park sand, so nothing's stable, nothing has rooted, and we get home that night, and I go into my home office, and I see the answering machine blinking. And I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to push the button. I pushed the button, and it was the homeowner. The storm had hit it was catastrophic the way it hit the property. Washed the driveway out, washed half the lawn out, put a crevice in the driveway. She pulled into the driveway. The car tipped over into the crevice that was formed in the driveway. Oh, man. And the next 2 weeks, we were rebuilding that driveway, just rebuilding the driveway, resetting the landscaping, and it cost me a lot of money that I couldn't afford to, to invest in at that time. But it was just like, got to fix it, got to finish it, and move on.
Well, it was worth the story for me to hear. I know you might know.
And it was just like, this went on. And we called it the Big Dig, my guys and I, because a friend of mine let me borrow his skid steer, and we worked on it. We worked on it for a couple of weeks, just resetting everything, because I couldn't afford to bring the trades back in and have them redo it.
Yeah.
So I said, we'll do it. And we're doing, probably had remodels going on at the same time, just keeping cash flow, just making things happen. Whenever I had houses on, I always had the remodels going on at the same time, just because you need to make cash flow. So just being ready and being prepared for the unforeseen, in the industry.
A lot of businesses are structured well for one or the other, new homes or renovations, and you did both. How do they differ, and how did you handle both of them at the same time? Did you have separate crews for remodeling versus new construction? Did you use one as filler?
Yeah. I always kept the remodeling going, and I always wanted to get out of the remodeling because I wanted to be a home builder. And I said, I want to elevate and get to that next step, builder developer. So, but I always had a lead carpenter, a master carpenter, basically by my side, someone that was more experienced than I was, that was just a better overall master carpenter, and hopefully with some management skills at the same time. So throughout my 35 years, I always had one guy that was a good, solid lead carpenter that I can plug into an addition and say, here, this is what I designed. This is how we're going to build it. Here comes the trades. I'm throwing them at you, manage them, and do all the carpentry work in between to keep those guys moving forward. Because you have to have presence on a remodel job 24/7. So that was my point guy to have on the job site. Sometimes I throw labor at him to help him with the labor tasks of the project. But for the most part, keep him on the job site, producing what he needs to produce to keep the trades moving forward, and manage the trades and keep that job in motion, and manage the customer. Then I would pop in once or twice a day, just make sure everything was going good. Then jump out and have one or two houses going where I was managing those trades and those subs. So it was easier. I'd always say it. I could have 5 houses going on and one remodel, but most of the time was spent on that remodel because it was just that much. There was that much more attention to detail required on the remodels. But with the houses, I was able to have the right subs in place and then just keep them moving forward and just keep things moving consecutively to keep the production of the home going.
Where's your career now? Are you still building?
I'm doing more consulting than building, as we've talked about in the past. I'm doing a lot of advising and consulting with builders, with remodelers, with building supply people, trades, architects. Just this morning I was talking with an architect. We're talking about a project and we're just kind of kicking back and forth. And I said, geez, if you need something, you need a contractor, an advisor to come on board, let me know. I'd be happy to step in, be the liaison between you and the customer and then the contractor. So I've found this new kind of niche, I guess, with what I do in my services and in my business circle, where I can take my experiences and utilize them in a different way within the business. Not building as much as I did in the past. Again, I mentioned I purchased a lot and I may build a house on it, but there's part of me that says, maybe I'll just sell it and let somebody else build on it. Just because I still love to build, but I don't really have the time to sit and manage the projects like I used to.
So you're more on the back end of stuff now with the consulting.
Yeah.
And last week when we talked, you said you might even enjoy this more. Is that true?
I do. Well, it's enjoyable to share these experiences and then to help people. Over the years, I don't know how, but I've developed this resource base of subcontractors, suppliers, people in the industry that I work with, and other contractors who I have a lot of good relationships with, other builders, remodelers, developers. We're constantly networking and sharing experiences. And I've always had a good catalog of people in my phone. It's who do you have? I need a plumber. I need a heating guy. So I've always felt it would help the business in general just to have good relationships with people within the industry and then help people within the industry. And I'm finding I get more gratification now, just I guess kind of the same gratification that you get out of building by helping people build, whether that sounds accurate or not to you, because you're at you're in that thrill stage where you enjoy building, physically building. But I guess I'm still building something. If I'm helping somebody build their business, that's fun, and if you can assist somebody and get them through some of the failures and trials and issues that I've gone through in the business, if I can help them avoid that or help them get through it, that's I enjoy that.
So it sounds like you have a more worldly perspective of the industry now.
Yeah. I think just a lot of years of experience. It's funny because I up until a couple of years ago, I always thought of myself as not this very experienced guy in the business until I started really helping people more. Then I said, geez, I've done that. Let me help him, and I'm like, I guess I've done a lot of things, had a lot of successes, had a lot of failures as well, but you learn from the failures and try to make them successes next time through.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this is a business that, again, you could do 100 bathroom remodels that are 5 feet by 10 feet, 5-foot tub on the back wall, 42-inch vanity and a toilet. But every time you do one of those, there's going to be something different in there, right? And it's a matter of what you're prepared for.
That's why you love to hate them.
Yeah, but that's why. But there's a challenge there as well. On Saturday, I did on Saturday, replaced the toilet at my parents' house with my brother. And he said, I've got the toilet and I've got a supply line. I'm like, but to get a wax range, get 2 rings, get one without a flange, one with a flange. To get new bolts, make sure you get bolts. And I said, trust me when I tell you this. We're going to take that toilet up, and then there's going to be something else we need.
Mm-hmm.
No, we've got everything. Take the toilet up. The flange is totally rotted, the metal flange.
Mm-hmm.
Go to Lowe's, Home Depot, wherever you're going to go. We need a flange replacement kit. Go. It's like you can do it 100 times, and it never, most of the time in remodeling, it's never done the same way twice.
Yep.
And it's just, you have to be ready for it, though. And it's just doing that on Saturday. It was like, I can still work in the field a little bit and know what I'm doing. But yet on Sunday, my back was killing me. So I was hungover. I'm like, I'll hold the toilet up and you guide the bolts in. No, let me take it. No, I'll hold it. I know how to do this. Like I said, the mind wants to do it, but the body's saying you can't do what you used to do.
Yep. Looking at the industry from where you're sitting now, how do you feel New York is faring in the future? Do you think this area has always been pretty, stable, correct? Because of the state jobs.
Yeah.
Where do you see us going in the next 10 years?
We'll be fine. We'll figure out our path and our direction. I've been through cycles in this state, in this area, counties, Albany, Schenectady, Saratoga. We always figure out where we need to go with this. And I think we're going through that right now. We're coming off of pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID markets in our industry, both building and remodeling. And now we're into this post-COVID market where we're kind of settling in, new administration, different things going on in government in New York State. We'll figure out where to go. And I don't think we're going to see the volume days that we once saw with production builders. We're always going to have a market here. People always need housing. People always need houses repaired. There's always going to be a market. And I thought of this early on in my career. For the remodeling side of it, every house needs to be repaired. There'll never be too many contractors in the residential remodeling or repair world. There'll never be too many.
Mm-hmm.
Every house needs a repair of some type or another somewhere down the line. Mm-hmm. Then the housing thing is there's always a need for housing. Throughout history, people and new home ownership, there's always a demand. There may not be as many people in the pool at one particular time of year, but there's always going to be a market. Mm-hmm. I had a good friend of mine, builder, say to me once, and he's been a builder since 71. He said we had 17% interest rates on mortgages in 71 or 72, some crazy rate like that. And he said, we still sold houses.
Yeah.
We still sold houses. I'm like, because he was a partner of mine later on, and we were doing a project together, and the rates were going from 7 to 9. And I got really, really nervous. I said, hey, the rates are going to be at 9%. Are we going to be okay? That's when he came at me with that story. And I said, okay. Then another time he said to me, you build a house on spec. You ever see a house never sell? You ever see a brand new house sit vacant forever?
Before, yeah.
I'm like, that's right. They'll sell one way or another, whether it's profitable or not. What's the worst case scenario? You sell it for cost, you get all your money back. On to the next lesson learned, go.
I remember being in a golf event with you. Gosh, it must have been 6 years ago. It was pre-COVID.
Probably when you framed that house for me.
I was out of frame and we had started building.
Yeah.
And you said, how you doing? I heard you're building. What's going on? And I was telling you, and you said, are you nervous? You seem like, I said, I don't really know what to expect, because people were talking back then that we might start to see a downturn. And you said, Scott, same thing that guy told you. I'll never forget it. I sold houses at 9%. If the interest is hike up a little bit, it's not going to make a difference. It'll always go. You might have to lower your price, but you move on to the next one. Yeah. I never forgot that.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, that's what happens. That's part of being in the business long term. You're going to have good projects and bad projects. And sometimes it's out of your control. The market falls out from underneath you, and interest rates go up. You're speculating. You're gambling. We gamble in this business, basically. Speculating is gambling, in some form or another. And so you're hedging, that it's going to turn out a certain way and it goes a different direction. You got to survive it and move on. That was the advice. Just keep going, keep pushing. That's what this one builder partner friend of mine always said. Just keep pushing. Just keep pushing because if it's not strong now, it'll turn and you'll catch it again. And you're learning as you go too, and you won't make those same mistakes. And you'll learn more. And I said this to you, that same builder said to me the first time I had a piece of land in my hand, I'm like, I'm going to build a house on it. How much should I make? And he said, as much as you can. And he walked away from me. Yeah. And I heard him loud and clear. You have to figure this out. Do your math, know your business, your trades, your industry, your materials, your subcontractors, do your math, and then go ahead, start building it. And hopefully everything falls in the correct columns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The cost to build, it's going to be what it is.
It is, right.
The market's going to kind of determine where that is going to land.
Right.
You just can't you can't get too overboard with the finishes.
Yeah. Well, you have to keep it in perspective. You have to have a good business plan early on and stick to that plan. Mm-hmm. Again, on speculation, if you're building on speculation, it's just, try to go in conservative and know your market, one Saratoga County versus Schenectady County versus Albany County, different markets, different values, and, different wants and needs for the consumer.
So your business was structured very similar to mine. You worked with your wife.
Yeah.
Which is, we've both talked about this, probably the best decision we've ever made to keep somebody in-house handling a lot of the financials.
Yeah.
How did you plan for, you didn't do a succession plan, correct? So you have
Correct.
A son, but he's in a different industry. When did you start planning for towards the end of your career? And did you pick certain projects? A lot of guys do apartments, or how did you figure that out?
So back to, you said my wife. So my wife has been my partner from day one. She's handled the home office, the books, everything, and the kids and the family and all that stuff while I was out working. So I couldn't have done it without her. Mm-hmm. Having a good wife at home, a business partner, that's that's why we survived the good and the bad. She brought me in at 12 o'clock at night and said, well, why are you pacing up and down the driveway? I said, because I don't think this project's going to work. We got to figure out how to come up with more money. And she'd say to me, say a prayer, God has a plan in this, and just stay faithful and keep serving, keep working forward and serving on performing unto him. And, it'll.
A lot of builders are very faithful, and I don't know if that's coincidence or.
Well, it's just, and it keeps you humble at the same time because, there's, you're involved with so many different aspects of money in this business. It's just, you just have to keep everything in check and in order and just kind of, do things the right way and just constantly watch and track and keep hold of everything. Mm-hmm. So back to your question was.
Financial planning for the future for yourself.
So succession.
Yeah.
Didn't really think much about it because I went to a fault. But I always, it was like build this remodeling business, build the home building business, and you'll just keep building houses. So you don't want to build anymore. You'll keep the remodeling going. At one point, when my son was going through high school and then into college, I thought he'd come into the business, and he did. He kind of circled back into it a couple of times, but I realized that there was more for him out there and his strengths. If he stayed with me in the business, it was kind of like, I'm going to hold this kid back, and I know he can do more. Mm-hmm. So it got to a point where I said to Chris, my wife, let's let Matt do his thing, and we'll figure out how to run this business and finish this business on our own. And I hadn't created a succession for the business other than thinking, maybe someday Matt would come into the business. But again, didn't want to force him into it, and didn't want to force something to go in a direction that was just very difficult at the time for me, more so than him. Because,
what do you mean?
I was just, let's see, I didn't have I had this sense of, I'm Anthony, I built this business, I know every aspect of the business. He could never do it the way I do it because I know the technical side of the business and how to merge it with the financial and the business side of it, which he had it all figured out, to be honest with you. I just was not willing to change and I wasn't ready for that change, but there was always something in me that, and then my wife as well, that we both said, there's more for him out there. He'll be fine. We don't need, there's more for him out there. He'll do better things on his own because he was very ambitious business wise, but he was always there for me and wanting to do it with me if I was willing to do it. But it became, it was me inside. I just felt like, I'll just let him go do his thing. And he's been successful doing what he does, and he's doing it. And it's more gratifying watching him do his thing on his own, building his business and his company. And I'll survive. I'll be fine.
What does he do?
He does financial real estate development.
So it's essentially the same industry, correct?
Yes, essentially, yes. He has a finance degree, so he puts financial structures together for real estate deals, basically. Sets up the financing, puts it all together, the pro formas, and brings the lenders in and makes it happen.
Oh, very cool.
From the financial side.
We got to get him in here.
Yeah, actually, you really should. So he saw me do that on the small scale housing side, and he always helped me with that. Even when he was, I think in high school, he was still helping me put the numbers together and run the spreadsheets. Mm-hmm. Then in college, and then I've watched him take all that and just take it up to the next level. And to keep him in the remodeling business, again, he had a passion for it, but, I knew what his real ability was and potential was, I guess. And I didn't want to hinder that.
Did he hint towards it?
No, he was all in.
Yeah.
He was all in. It was more me. I just wasn't ready for that at that time.
I have heard other people say the first generation to second is the hardest to pass on. One of the guys I listen to quite often is Dave Ramsey and his Entree Leadership. And he says guys that start businesses are the ones that scratch and claw and eat dirt and spit out money. And even when we're wrong, we're still right, because that's the type of person it takes to grow a business. So when you try and let go of that, it's sandpaper sometimes.
It was, you know what it was for me more so than anything, and reflecting back, and even Chris will say it was worrying about failure. Because I had
for him or for you?
For the whole thing, because I'd been like this over the years. You have hot spots where you're doing really well, then you have downtime when you're just trying to make it happen. Where you had strengths and weaknesses in your business path, and I didn't want to get to a point where we had a weak spot and then financial hardship. I'm like, I got through it. I just didn't want him to have to go through that. Mm-hmm. Especially if he was going to have a family and rely on this company. I guess it was my own. Little bit of fear, I guess, that.
How did you prep for those downturns?
Keep the remodeling book full. Just at the end of the day, just always keep that remodeling book full. Do what you have to do, whether it's a bathroom or roof. I used to tear roofs off and do roofs. We used to make good money on roofs, but roofs were good cash flow. Back in the day, you can get in and out in a day and you can make some decent money. Bathrooms or kitchens, additions were the big ones that I wanted. And when I started doing the additions, you can really do well with the additions if you structure them right, design them right, then structure them right. Mm-hmm.
You do or did a lot of the design work, correct?
Well, I would work with architects, professional designers, and just be involved in that process with the homeowner. We'd sit in on a design meeting. It was the architect, myself, and the customer, and we would collaboratively design that. The whole time the architect's saying how we should design it, listening to the customer, I'm saying, how am I going to build this and how am I going to build it into their budget, within their budget. So I have to control that process, keep everybody thinking on the same, in the same direction. So that, again, knowing what their ultimate budget was, that the project was not over-designed. Mm-hmm. And I still feel very strongly about that. And I'm actually doing a lot of that now, still for other people.
Do you ever plan on stopping?
No, I'll stop when I'm done. But again, doing the things I'm doing now, it's kind of, again, just as thrilling, helping people grow their businesses. It's just as gratifying, as I said earlier, and just as thrilling for me to some degree to, those are building little successes instead of building one big success, a project or something that's visibly, that you can see that's visual and physical that you just built at the end of the day. When you can see somebody or help somebody, I was just involved with a big project for a smaller remodeler. It was a big volume job, and I set up the design, I set up the contractor, and put it all together and gave it to a contractor that was, I knew we could do it because he had done some things for me in the past, and he had some history of doing some bigger things, but not this big. So I kept one eye on it along the way, and he was successful at it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Mm-hmm.
Stopping back over to the job site with the homeowner, one of his guys or him. How's the project going? Are you happy? Interviewing the homeowner. Tell me how you felt the whole process went with the contractor. Tell me, how do you do? Because I put him here, and I didn't put him there. I helped him get the job basically by referring him and then showing him the job. So yeah, you get those same feelings of accomplishment at the end of the day.
I remember sitting down with a customer with you one time. It was somebody that you were friends with that you referred to us that you didn't, you were getting out of the remodeling. So you said, I think this would be good for Scott. So we went and sat down, and before that meeting, I was getting ready. He was leaving my house, and my wife was looking at me. She's like, "What is wrong with you? Are you I said, "I am really nervous." Right? Yeah. She goes, "Why are you nervous?" I mean, I've been in business for 13 years. And she said, or I told her, I'm meeting with Anthony. Anthony's going to be there. She said, so? Yeah. You don't remember the guy from the builder show with Bellevue? We met in the casino. She says, so?
No, it was with Curtis.
Or it was Curtis, yeah. And I said, it's different. I could sit down with any customer, but I framed one of your houses for you, and you and I aligned perfectly because I'd never built for somebody that had as much OCD as me. And that's why I'm like, I got to sit there. This guy's going to be judging me. He's going to be taking notes. I was petrified.
And
man.
I truly went into that meeting as an advisor to you, as someone that could, great, I'll put Scott in front of these people. Yeah. It's a good project. Let's do our best to make this successful for everybody. And so I don't ever want to have anybody feel like they're intimidated by me.
No, it was all good, but it was almost like my grandfather sitting next to me or something. Yeah. I can't mess this up. So how can people, do you do this openly to other contractors? How can people get a hold of you today if they want to?
Just call me, call my cell. Okay. It's just kind of go on my website, find my number and call me. It's just kind of like.
What's the name of your company?
Guidarelli Construction, Inc. My marketing name is Guidarelli Building and Design.
Okay.
But I've always been Guidarelli Construction, Inc. since 1991.
Okay.
Yeah.
Haven't changed it.
Haven't changed it, and again, I've changed the services around a little bit, but really haven't to some degree. It's kind of like if you want to build an addition, if you want to build a custom home, if you're looking to improve your business or whatever you're doing in the industry, if you want some advice or guidance, just call. It's kind of like it's what we do. Mm-hmm. It's just sharing group. So we should maybe talk a little bit about the networking of CRBR, the professional builders associations, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. And that has a lot to do with the way I share with people now.
Okay.
Because early on in my career, I got involved with the Professional Building and Remodeling Organization, and I was a member of the Remodelers Council, and I was a young guy mentoring from people that were veterans in the business, and I was just like you. I was in front of those guys saying, I better listen to him. He's telling me what to do, and he's a professional, and he has a big crew of people, and he studies professional remodeling from an educational perspective, and it was about growing and building your business in a professional way, then also networking and sharing and helping others in the industry. And again, it goes back to that's what it's about. It's about developing relationships, positive relationships within the business, from within the business and from outside of the business, being your customers and other people that are in business in general. It's like having relationships. If you can make relationships, you can develop business.
Mm-hmm. And the CRBRA is a big one for us.
Yeah.
I was against that at first.
You didn't have the time.
I don't have the time for this. I talk to everybody that I see on the street. What is the point of it? And then since we've been involved with them, it's been instrumental for us. Not only with meeting people at events, but also you need somebody, your insurance agent retired. They have a list of all those businesses that you have access to.
Right.
And they're vetted.
Right.
Too.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And it's just a great resource for, again, assisting in the development of your business, in the positive growth of your business. Mm-hmm. It's just, like I said, it was about developing relationships, which blossoms into other things.
They do pretty well with acquiring builders. I feel like they have a hard time getting contractors on board.
Yeah, it's so I'm not sure where that's all going these days because you guys inspire me. There's a younger generation of builders and remodelers right now that are seeking to be professional builders and remodelers, and understanding that they need to belong to a professional organization to get to that next level. There was a void for a while there. People were just too busy and didn't. There was a generation that was kind of evolving out of it. There was a void. And now there's a generation that's coming into it and understanding that, yeah, we want to do this in a professional way. It's a good industry. It's a good business model, from many perspectives, but you need to do it the professional way. And with today's information that's out there, there's so much technology and information. A lot of times you don't have to resort back to, we used to, I think in the old Builders Association, there were catalogs, there was books about code and about product. It's all here now.
It's all on your phone.
It's kind of like, that side of it, is there and it's accessible if you need it. But there's just so much more information out there today in the internet and everywhere else to assist in the professionalism of the business, of the industry. But it brings it all home and all together belonging to those professional organizations. So, because when you can network with people, peers amongst when you can network amongst peers within your industry, it just helps everybody grow.
Yeah. And no offense, the industry is old. I'm not pointing this finger at you, but there's not a lot of people in my age group coming up. Maybe a handful.
There's more than there had been in the past. So
in the past 5 years, probably, right?
There are.
Yeah.
And, I do a lot of networking again with some other businesses, and I'm exposed to these younger contractors, their business models and what they're doing. And I'm I'm very optimistic as to, the positive growth of the industry. It was always about trying to be professional within the industry, separate yourself, be a professional builder, professional remodeler, trying to maintain that professional level. And I think it's sought after more now than ever. And I see it in you, to be honest with you. It's nice to see you taking your business to the next level and wanting to do this next growth pattern for your business, right? Mm-hmm. You're not still, but you're always evolving, right?
Absolutely.
You're always trying to figure out what to do next, how to do it the best you can do it, how to satisfy the market, because the market changes too. So, again, the industry, the business isn't black and white. You have to follow the market, and then sometimes you have to adjust your business path accordingly. Mm-hmm. That goes back to me with the remodeling and building. So we had times when remodeling was always steady, but there was luxury remodeling and then there was necessity remodeling. When luxury remodeling fell away because interest rates went high, I had to retool and say necessity remodeling, re-roof.
So how do you do that?
Versus luxury bathroom. You just have to stay in the market. You have to stay aware as to what's going on out there.
Well, how do you target that?
You got to figure out how to be aware of what's going on. I'm sorry to repeat myself, but read the paper, listen to the news, understand your industry publications, that's what's going on. Learn about financing, what's going on in the financial world, how that's going to impact interest rates, which will impact, again, luxury spending.
Right, but you're not just sitting there saying, okay, all of a sudden I'm going to target roofs. There had to be a way that you went after that market.
That was just me knowing and understanding that, again, there's so many roofs out there that are going bad. I need to make some cash flow. Let's do some roofs.
So advertising?
Advertise.
Okay.
I've got pictures of my Guidarelli construction, additions, renovations, roofing, siding, repairs, home improvements. I had everything on my signs, on my trailers. But it kept
Really?
And this goes back to what that gentleman had told me way back when. Be diversified and do a lot of different services, and you'll always stay busy.
So I'll put them on the side of the trailer with Velcro and
there you go.
Rip them off. All right, now we're ready for the next phase of the industry. No.
Yep.
Okay. So you always marked your trailers?
I've always had signage everywhere.
Okay.
Always tried to look professional, have a professional appearance.
Your trucks?
Trucks, golf shirts, logos. It was just trying to have clean and neat job sites that presented well for drive-bys. I've had people hire me because our job sites were clean and neat and professional looking. I've had them come to my job sites and saying, "See, I've been watching you. I see the way you keep your project. I want you to work for me." Well, don't you care about my quality? No, but I can see how you've managed things from that perspective. You must do good work.
That's the OCD I was talking about.
Literally had a guy say that to me once. I built him a $1 million house.
Really?
He said, "I've been watching you build that house." He said, "You're building my house." He lived across the street, and I never knew he lived across the street. And I waved to this guy, and he said, "I've watched you." He says, "You're building my house."
Really?
Yeah. And it's just about, again, trying to maintain professionalism within the industry.
You've always worn a collared shirt.
Yeah. My brothers were in the business of apparel and marketing and advertising specialty items. So it was like, I want the golf shirts with collars and I'll put them on the carpenters and they'll look professional. And they did. And it worked.
It makes a difference.
I think it worked. If I had to go back and measure some things, I'd like just professionalism was probably one of the key factors in everything.
That's interesting. You've come a long way. Clearly.
I don't know where I've come to.
But you never thought your career would take the turn it has?
I don't know.
Correct or no?
Yes or no? It's funny because I guess I haven't. I did not think, I didn't know or understand where it was going to end up. I just knew I would just keep working at it, which is kind of reckless. But got the kids through high school, through college, through marriages. It's like we're done. I have grandkids now, and we're enjoying that. And then now it's just like, okay, take things from a different perspective, from a business perspective, where it's just like, okay, you can switch gears a little bit, but you still need to be active because you need to be alive.
Do you ever see yourself getting back full bore into building and remodeling? I know you're still doing it, but you
never know.
Yeah.
You never know. I still have all my equipment. I still have everything. I still have trailer lettered up with my name on it. I still keep a presence out there with my website. Do I see myself getting back into it and saying, okay, I'm going to jump back in and hire 5 guys? No. It's going to be basically just from a, I guess, administrative, managerial perspective. And I think that's what I kind of set myself up to do, I guess, to finish. Because physically, I'd love to jump back into the field, but physically, it's not good. It's not healthy.
You still have a tool belt in the back of your truck, don't you?
I have the boxes. I don't have the belt. I won't keep the belt in there.
The leather's started to dry out a little bit.
I actually have that one still. That one's in my shed.
Do you really?
Yeah, the leather one.
Did you wear it this weekend, put in the toilet?
No.
All right.
No. But I still have 3 toolboxes in the back of my truck loaded with items. If an old customer calls me and I'm on my way home and they say something like, my door's sticking, could you stop? I'm probably going to stop.
Yeah. So last thing, and we're almost out of time. If you had one piece of advice to give somebody starting today in the remodeling and building industry, what would it be?
Seek professional direction from every perspective. Try to be a professional within the industry and do what you have to do to get there.
Awesome.
I think that's number 1.
All right. And wear a collared polo with your logo on.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Anthony, for coming. I really
Thanks.
appreciate
you having me.
I'm sure you'll be back. This is a good one.
Yeah, it's like an hour went by already.
I know. I told you to be quick.
Yeah.
He was so nervous, but no, I'm kidding.
No, I wasn't nervous. It's kind of like I said, we just talk shop.
Yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed what you heard. Check us out on YouTube, Spotify, or any of your major podcast providers. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks again for listening. I'm your host, Scott Raffensperger, and with me today, Anthony Guidarelli.